What's up, everyone? We are about to go live. Well, we are live, but we're just waiting for our notifications to get out and for Phil and Yanni to come and join me. I'm the only one that's ready today. We'll see you soon.
Whole body workouts. How much do you need to do to stay strong? I don't know why I did that. Today we're unpacking the last 2 movements of our 5 exercise whole body circuit to maintain strength whilst you're on vacation. It's a pointy day. And that is the overhead press and the chin up. These are 2 massive bang for your buck movements that you really want to get right because they're a high risk to reward ratio, but they're awesome. We got Phil here, we got Rad here, we're ready to party. Let's do this right after this. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. No, too much.
Hey everyone, in case we haven't met, my name's Rad Burmeister, that's my brother Yanni Burmeister, and then Phil White over there. We're the founders of Unity Gym and the creators of the UMS, the Unified Movement System, where we take driven people and turn them into superhumans. And the way we do that, the way we get such a... Thanks, mate.
It's all right, keep going.
The way we get such astonishing results with our members is that we've created a program that has a balance between strength and flexibility. If you want to know how we do that, download the Flexibility Blueprint. It's a free download. You can get it from the link in the description of this video.
It's Black Friday, everyone, in Australia anyway. In America, it will be soon. And we have an epic Black Friday sale, 60% off everything, even Rad's clothes. And that's why we're all in black. Yeah. We're all in black always. But anyway, how you doing, Phil?
Yeah, very well. Very well. Excited to wrap this one up. I think it's a really important topic this time of year. So let's finish it off.
Let's crush it. And what we should probably talk about first of all is, I think the key insight for today's show is around form and technique. So a lot of people, I'll go so far as to say most people are doing pull-ups wrong, and they're lacking a fundamental element of a pull-up, which is scapular control. Now, if you missed our deep dive into how to do pull-ups properly, I think it was last week, we really unpacked this and went deep into the pull-up itself. Today we're going to brush over it, so if you do need to go deeper and if you're struggling with your pull-ups, I do urge you to go back and watch last week's series. We did 5 whole shows on unpacking the pull-up, but it's super important to understand that if you're hunching forward and not able to control the scapula and make that pull up. I just did a chin up and then went to a pull up. So we're going to talk about pull ups today. If you can't keep the scapula down and controlled and keep your posture nice at the top, it can become quite a big problem. We're going to talk about what can happen and the risks that can sort of evolve, issues that can evolve in your body if you're doing that a lot at the end of the show. First and foremost, we just want to make sure that you guys understand that it is super important, and it's as important as not hyperextending the back in the overhead press and sort of turning it into a standing chest press. So because that you can do that, and it's a great exercise, and some people do it, but it takes a lot of conditioning so you don't sort of blow your back out or injure yourself or flare things up in your back. So should we dive out and jump into this? Yeah, I'm on the mic today and I'm going to try and do my best not to railroad the whole discussion. I want to keep these guys involved. I could talk underwater and other than sounding like I'd still go.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A, that's right. So let's clear this bar so that we can do some pull-ups here. And yeah, maybe do this one. Maybe just remove the bench. So Rad's Rad's drawn the short straw today, and he's going to be demonstrating our exercises. So first and we're doing pronated. Yeah, you can't do it.
Of course I can, but fuck.
We just did a
pull-up workout.
We just did a pull-up workout. So he's fully warmed up. This is going to be the most perfect explosive pull-up you've ever seen. Like, absolutely. Build the pressure. Okay, let's just quickly show what scapular movement looks like. So the first thing that I like to do when, the rigatoni comes out. The first thing I like to do is see how the scapula are moving in a pull-up. The scapula are these big bones here. Why don't you come and explain the scapula?
I mean, I feel like we did a whole lot of this last week, so just
doesn't matter. They may not have seen it.
Yeah, for a real brief one, we're just looking at the triangular like bone here. That's the scapula. So you can see as he's pulling up, it's tucking back down here by the lower traps, and the rhomboid's pulling it in like that. So
Beautiful. So if you can't do what Rad just did there, then doing pull-ups is going to be beyond your capability right now, and you need to regress to something a little easier. Go back and watch last week's series where we show you how to regress the pull-up, doing easier variations, and start there, because what you're going to do is reinforce faulty movement patterns, which we're going to go into detail about the risks involved in that in a sec, but they really can mess you up and cause some drama. Okay, have a little rest, shrug it off. Let's go over to the other side. Now, here's the interesting factor. When we go to a pushing movement like a heavy barbell military press, we don't want movement in the scapula, because movement in the scapula can create instability. Why don't you come and quickly share a little bit of insight into why we don't want the scapula on this exercise?
We've talked a lot about the overhead position for the shoulder in previous shows as well, but again, when you're getting into that overhead position, your shoulder blades are going to need to get that little bit of movement, but you've always got that intention of drawing your shoulders back and down, so it's giving a really stable base to move from. Because if you go up and you hunch your shoulders, and I'm sure if you've seen people in the gym, when they're lifting up, they get into this position. It's going to be like it's much harder to produce strength from there, because your shoulder blades are going to be moving around quite a lot. So it's about having the intention, drawing the shoulders back and down, but then pushing up and allowing a little bit of movement.
Yep, cool. So let's have a look at Rad demonstrate with absolutely no weight on his bar. And guys, if you are going for a workout, don't ever do what Rad and I just did there, which is to set yourself up with a rack that's at the wrong height, because if you fail and you need to get that barbell back on the rack quickly, you don't want to be struggling to get it on. You want to be able to just walk forward and rack the bar again. So let's have a look at what Rad's doing there. He's keeping a nice torso position. He's not hyperextending through the lumbar here, and that's really, really important. You'll notice that the bar path is really nice, straight up and down. It does move a little bit around his chin, and it's always going to have to do that. Pay attention to his elbows. The elbow position, I'll jump in, you can have a rest. I know that we don't need Rad to get any more jacked than he already is. So I'll talk about the grip in a sec, because it's a little bit controversial. So the initial movement, the elbows should be in front of the body. And as we pass through, the scapular plane, as we pass through the scapular plane, the elbows so they start sort of out in front, and then they're going to go a little bit wider as we go up, and they call that the scapular plane. Is that right? Yep. It's good to have Phil here. He makes sure that he bullshit proofs what I'm saying. So the initial press is like a front raise to about here, and then as we go into that transition above the head, we actually want to bring the elbow into the scapular plane. So they're going to come up, and then they're going to go out a little bit.
Quite clear. So the sagittal plane movement, which is straight up in front, which is flexion and extension. Then you've got coronal plane, which is going into abduction and adduction. So scapular plane is where you come in between the two. So it's not quite here, it's not quite there, it's in front. And that's generally the most comfortable position for your shoulders to be in.
Perfect. This is very important, because you don't want the shoulder press to be occurring in the position out here, because do you want to just quickly explain the risks of that?
It's just a more challenging position for your shoulder. So for most people starting off, definitely start off in this nice sort of neutral scapular plane position. If you're getting into that coronal plane, so that totally abducted position, generally it's a bit harder to get the clearance for as you're lifting up. You're generally going to close down that subacromial space and cause a bit more. It's going to be more complicated. So it can be a progression if you're really keen to build up that strength in the outer range. So Rad at the moment, rehabbing his shoulder injury, he's finding the last little bit that he needs to get strong is doing behind the head press, because that coronal plane movement is challenging, but he spent months and months doing plenty of controlled movement in the
key, and I don't know if you want to say something, is mobility. You have to be flexible to do it. And most people that we've experienced don't have that mobility and flexibility when they start, and that's something that they need to work on. So working straight in that plane, it's why it's recommended not to do behind the head lat pull down and things like that. They're good exercises if you can do them, but you need that flexibility first.
The overhead mobility program video that seems to be pretty popular on YouTube at the moment.
Yeah, from none other than Unity Gym. All right, so let's go back to the pull-up now, and let's demonstrate a full pull-up. Let's go, Rad. So Rad's going to do what we call chest to bar pull up, which is much, much harder, but certainly something to pay attention to. Look at the scapular movement. So you'll notice when we do a pull up, the first thing that initiates is that scapula, and then we finish the pull up. And if you can get that chest to bar, that's fantastic. But we always want to see initiate through the scapula, chest to bar, full lockout at the bottom.
What does it look like for a lot of people playing home?
What's that?
Just demonstrate the
Okay.
what not to do.
Yep. So what not to do? No scapular movement, all in the arms. Hunching forward, trying to get up like that. I can't even do it. I haven't done it for that long. Did that look right?
I mean, yeah, that looks perfectly wrong.
Yeah, good.
And you can see it is much harder at that top position. It's much harder to produce that strength when your scapulas aren't in that nice controlled position. So as we've talked about, getting the shoulders back and down and having that intention to pull your shoulder blades down gives you that really solid base to move.
You know, it's really interesting because we're about to go in and talk about what can fundamentally go wrong when you mess this up. And the moment that I did it wrong, I got a pinch in my old tendinopathy regions in my forearms and elbows, which is what we were talking about in here. And we're going to go in and talk about that in a sec. So, do we understand the pull-up? How about you, audience? Yes. Do we understand the overhead press?
Can we just do a few more overhead press? I just want to point out the scapular movement with the overhead press.
Okay, yep. I'll come close because I got the mic.
So you come around.
We should do a Patreon to get Phil a mic.
Yeah, that's it, looking out.
These are $1,100 and we're on a shoestring budget here, tribe.
So with what we were talking about before, where you're trying to get that intention of keeping the shoulder blades back and down, if you watch as he lifts up, he's going to get a little bit of that lateral rotation. So you can see his shoulder blade comes from here out to here. Now that's perfect because you need to have that to allow your arm up to get overhead. But you can see the muscle activity as he's doing it. There's plenty going on there, and he's nice and tight through his lower traps, so he's given this like a nice stable base, having a really strong anchor there, so that he's able to produce force overhead. So yeah, if you're totally locked down through here, you're going to cause yourself subacromial impingement because you won't get the adequate rotation to allow that clearance. So
now, the last thing I'll demonstrate before we go back in is what we refer to as a standing chest press. And you will see, I got some friends who can do this at disgustingly heavy weights. Like I'm talking, I think Thor Bjornsson did like 180 kilos or something like that.
Bassett 110 can do 160.
160 kilos. And what these guys do is they get that hyperextension, they lean on their glutes, so they really squeeze the glutes, and they do the press like that. And it is still highly activating the delts, the clavicular fibers of the chest, and you get your chest involved. And these guys can do it because they've been lifting for so long and they've conditioned their body to be able to really hinge back, and they're not really so much like really resting heavily on the bone structure because they've got so much muscle mass to lean on. And that's really important to understand. So when you're starting out, you'll feel like you can lift a lot more. It's often referred to as a mechanical drop set when your shoulders fatigue and you lean back a bit and sort of disperse the load and tension into the chest a bit more. You'll be able to bang out a few more reps. But it's often at the
And basically there's no reason to do it unless you're trying to get some kind of record. So if you're competing to get that overhead press, you're doing log press in strongman competition, it makes sense to practice that movement. But if you're just trying to develop balanced shoulders, then you want to have that vertical push-pull and you want to have that horizontal push-pull and use a safer position like the inclined bench to kind of work those positions in between.
Yeah.
But if you're just getting that out for the sake of ego, then it doesn't make any sense to.
It's actually more beneficial to stay upright and start working into that acromial, is it coronal plane, where we can start to do behind the head pressing, because it's going to show Rad there, it's going to help demonstrate handstand. It'll help transfer over to being able to do handstands and things like that. We didn't script this, he just started doing a handstand. I thought we may as well show it. So yeah, bringing it into that coronal plane is going to help unlock the shoulders so that you can get into positions like what Rad was just demonstrating there. All right.
Yeah, unlike the rest of our very scripted performances, you can tell we're really working from the
just
cue
playing
cards
around. So let's sort of talk about the risks involved. First of all, with if you do continually bang out reps without getting this right. Before we go to the injury risks, Rad, why don't you share what happens in the central nervous system when you bang out bad reps?
Well, you strengthen the incorrect movement pattern, so you get better at whatever you practice, and if you practice the wrong thing, you get better at the wrong thing. And that's really bad, because bad habits are way harder to undo than good habits are to learn. So if you develop a bad habit, then you're going to really struggle down the track trying to get rid of it, because through movement we learn, it becomes part of our reflex. So it's like walking. You don't have to think how to walk. It's so ingrained in our reflex that we don't have to think of where our legs go and where our arms go. It just completely happens naturally. But a child is completely different. A child has to really focus on what they're doing. So the same thing happens, and if you try to teach yourself to walk a different way, it's very, very hard to do, which is why, people that have bad movement patterns, bad walking patterns, have to really go through a lot to try to correct them. So, and the hardest part is that people, they train with their ego, so they don't, they look at a movement like a pull-up, which so many people do wrong in the gym, and they just bang them out, and they think, well, everybody else is doing them, I should be able to do them, and they don't have the ability to analyze where they're at and go, okay, well, the pull-up is my goal, but I'm not ready for it, so I'm going to work on this, this, and this. And it's really, really bad.
A really good example, which we may as well use because we've got the footage there, is the handstand. Explain how you learn to do a handstand. You don't learn to do a handstand by kicking up and doing handstands.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just playing around there. I haven't actually done handstands for 8 months until a week ago when we had a handstand workshop here. And that was my first time in 8 months, and it was really good for me to see how well my rehab has come along. And but my practice to be able to learn how to do a handstand is all on the wall. You do there's heaps of different drills. It's all part of our handstand masterclass that you can get tomorrow for 60% off.
Hey!
There's all these drills that you do where the wall is supporting you. You don't practice the handstand to get good at the handstand. You practice all this other stuff, and that goes for any skill, any movement skill. You have to do all these groundwork before you get into it, and the pull-up is a movement skill.
I know Phil's gagging to share the injury risk in doing incorrect form. So let's talk about what we were talking about before, and sort of how does this tie in with my tendinopathy experiences?
So basically, when we were demonstrating how not to do it, I think it really illustrated something that you see quite commonly in people. And we talked about keeping in, especially last week, we talked about how to identify the weak point in your pull-up. And if you took our advice and recorded yourself, you might find that if you're really honest with yourself, and the video is very honest, you'll see that often people are really forcing out these reps. And so when you're in that hunch position where your upper traps are pulling up and you're basically not able to contain your shoulder blades back in that back and down position, it means you don't have that stable point for the muscles to work from, and muscles really like to have a stable point to then control a moving point. So I've kind of described it as like if you're trying to jump off solid ground, it's going to be much easier than jumping off what I usually say, a ice rink with standing on ice in slippery socks and trying to jump from there. So basically that's if your scapulars aren't in that nice controlled position, you don't have this stable point to push off, so it's going to be much harder to produce force. Whereas if you're nice and locked down, then it's going to be a much more stable point. So in that position, when you're pulling up, basically the muscles that are doing the pulling attach onto your shoulder blade there and around that area, and if they're not going to be able to work as efficiently if they're not in that controlled position. So you could see that already a lot of that force was getting transferred down to that elbow, and Yanni was getting, he was harking back to old pains that haven't been there for a long time because he does the form so well.
That's exactly right. And this is one of the things, I suffered severe tendinopathy at one stage in both my elbows to the point where it was quite debilitating and painful. And part of the process of figuring out how I was creating this problem was the fact that I had really bad upper body posture, and it was one of the things that led me down the path of really nailing my form and technique in movements like the pull-up, because I found that I was a huncher in pull-ups, and I was just, like Rad said before, training my ego. Okay, so before we go into some questions, because we do have a lot to go through, and we got a lot of great questions come through overnight. I promised that I'd tell you the loading parameters to put what we've done this week into a circuit. So we had a bit of stuff go down here that we had to record for our online tribe yesterday. So we didn't do the show yesterday, and that's why we did 2 movements today. We did the pull-up and the overhead press today. So to round the full body workout, if you haven't caught the entire series this week, we started with the deadlift, then we did the bench press, then we did the squat, and then we finished with the pull-up and overhead press as the 5th movement. So it's a 5 exercise circuit, and I do it 5 reps each because I've got quite a good training age, and I do 5 sets of that with about a 2-minute rest in between the end and start of a new round. So I don't have any rest except about 10 seconds, enough time to get myself to the next station, get my breath back, and then go again. And you build a lot of accumulative fatigue through this. So, you know, there is the element of strength because I'm only doing 5 repetitions each set, but there's also the element of accumulative fatigue and volume that builds up over those 5 reps. Now, where this can be manipulated to suit your personal needs is the amount of reps that you do and also the amount of sets that you do. So let's say hypothetically you are okay with all of these fairly advanced and complex compound movements, but you're not really dialed in with them. You haven't, your training age is probably, you know, 1 or 2 years only. Then I'd probably take it up to sort of the 8 rep range mark for all of the movements and only do 4 rounds or 4 sets of the circuit.
Yeah. As I've talked about quite a bit with what I think is really important in skill learning is that it is such a cognitive demand, and as Rad was talking about before, when you're learning to walk, you're thinking about each thing individually, and it's quite challenging. And so that's why earlier in the week I talked about potentially doing cluster sets, where if you're doing, say 8 in this example, you might do 4, have a brief rest, and then go again, because it's so challenging at the beginning with these compound movements to get all the moving parts right. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to just, have a quick break, reset, and go again. Because if you're busting out, 8, 12 reps, 15 reps, by the end they're usually looking pretty sloppy.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. And you could absolutely, if you're not as conditioned to exercise as myself or Rad or even Phil, you could absolutely take the rest intervals between each exercise up to 30, 45, 60 seconds even, And I like to make sure that every time I start the new circuit, I'm pretty fresh. So a good solid 2 minutes. Now, where this gets complex is flexibility. So Rad, why don't you explain why we wouldn't put, like our normal UMS training program, we wouldn't pair flexibility movements, exercises in between the sets for this particular circuit?
Mostly because you're time poor. You're not doing this circuit because you've got a whole lot of time. You're doing it because you're time poor, and you really just want to make sure that you maintain your strength, and you can maintain your flexibility by just doing a little bit of a mobility warm-up at the start and at the end. We're not trying to gain flexibility. And also because because it's an all-over body workout, it's upper and lower body. If you do any kind of stretching in between the sets, it's going to impact your ability to generate strength, and you're already going to impact that ability to generate strength enough by the amount of fatigue you get from doing from one exercise to the next. Even though you're going from upper to lower body, it's still the nervous system fatigue, and it's really tough.
I think that's a really key point, and I hope that people who have followed Unity for a while will know that you're generally in your usual workouts, you're pairing your lower body strength with your upper body flexibility and vice versa, because it is so key for, there's a lot of good research to show that if you're doing long passive stretches on the same muscle group that you're working out, then you're going to actually be weaker and more injury prone. So in a situation like this, where we do have all 5 movements are really ticking off all the boxes in the body, you just, there's not going to be the space to be doing flexibility within this workout. But, for this kind of context of this workout, it's, this is designed for Yanni, who's going on vacation. So there'll be other days where he's not in a gym, where it'll be simple to just, do that mobility workout, which will be nice and quick, or, in not within a gym.
Yeah. So I'm going to be working extremely hard to maintain my mobility by doing our ultimate exercise warm-up routine. We have an upper and a lower body warm-up routine, and also our 18-minute stretching routine, which is really an 18-minute mobility routine. There's a little bit of stretching in there, and they are brilliant at maintaining, both of them, and at maintaining flexibility. Remember, the goal for me whilst I'm away is not to gain strength and flexibility. It's just maintenance. I want to come back in January after a month of being away and not have to make up for lost time. I want to come back and pick up where I left off. The only skill that I'm going to work on whilst I'm away, actually developing skill in, is my hand balancing. I'm going to be working on handstands a lot whilst I'm away because I can do them anywhere, and I can do them in the hotel room for 10-15 minutes every morning, and that's nice and easy. I'll have a wall, I'll put dirty foot marks all over the hotel walls, and that's totally cool. I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's dig in. There's a couple of cool questions here. Why don't you dig into this, Rad?
Well, Cohen Parker's just said to our question of the day, what's your favourite chins or pull-ups and why? And Cohen said, assisted one-arm chin-ups since I want to progress to a one-arm chin-up, and it is hard enough to fit in hypertrophy or strength protocols because you can, when you do assisted one-arm chins, you can choose how much weight you're using there. So that's really good, man. My only feedback for you would be, I personally can't do a one-arm chin-up, and it's one of my goals, but I do definitely know how to train for them, and it's something that I'm including in my training, is that a one-arm chin-up is very rarely used as a hypertrophy movement. You have to be on another level. If you don't call it hypertrophy and strength, call it accumulation and intensification. You've got to be on another level of strength to be able to use a one-arm pull-up as a way of accumulating fatigue in your body. It's much more of an intensification exercise. So just be careful with how much you try to work hypertrophy in a one-arm pull-up. If it was my advice, I would be still working your pronated pull-ups and your pull-ups if you want to do a set of a cycle of hypertrophy training or accumulation, and save that one-arm chin-up for the intensification, because it is, especially if you can't do it yet, it is absolutely a move of intensification.
Can I just jump in and remind all the viewers, because this is a great opportunity to add some value. The three key elements to muscle hypertrophy are tension in the muscle, and that comes from lifting maximal weights, so heavy lifting. Then burn and pump, like the amount of metabolic damage that's caused to the muscle. And the two ways that you up the metabolic damage is to go for the burn and the pump through crazy time under tension. And the best way the bodybuilders do that is they avoid lockout at the end of the range, because that provides a momentary deload period for the muscle, so they sort of stop just before lockout in both direction and keep that burn going and maximize the muscle pump that Rad's got right now. And then the final one is eccentrics. There's much damage as you can possibly do to the muscle tissue, and those reps are full range of motion, slow eccentrics, and it's really about how much sort of pain you set yourself up for the following day. That's a good indication of how much you've effectively done that. So yeah, what Rad's saying there, you've got to try and combine all three of those elements into the workout, and the one-arm pull-up certainly does the muscle tension because it's a very heavy lift, but I'd argue that it's extremely hard to get the metabolic damage and the muscle burn and pump, the amount of volume, blood gorging into that area, because you just can't do it for enough time under tension. And I think that's what you were really talking about there.
Look, I mean, that is getting more technical than what I was talking about. What I was talking about more is, it's all good stuff what you've said, and of course I don't disagree with it, but I'm talking more about the idea of, like, the way that we teach people to program is, like, when in the UMS at the gym, we go through accumulation and intensification phases, and we do microcycles. So in a mesocycle of 6 weeks, there'll be different microcycles that are either accumulation or intensification, and there's so many different ways that we do that in our programming. And what we teach people is that when they do intensification, they choose a progression that is a version where it's hard for them to do more than the 3 to 5 rep range, because that is an intensification exercise. And then when they do an accumulation phase, they choose a progression that's more around that 8 rep range or 10 to 12 rep range for more of a beginner, because that gives them that accumulated fatigue, which is what causes hypertrophy. And if you can't do a one-arm pull-up yet, and your goal is to do a one-arm pull-up, then to reduce the amount of intensification on it so that you can do a hypertrophy protocols, hypertrophy rep ranges, it doesn't make sense to me. It's just not what I would be doing. I would be using different movements to do that. And I made the mistakes of training like what you're talking about there, Cohen, for a long time. I really just didn't understand the way that you use certain exercises based on how hard they are for you. And everything was just about calisthenics, and I didn't get the result that I think I should have gotten for the amount of time invested. And I'm getting
skin you put in the game.
And I'm getting far better results now from understanding these principles and understanding, okay, well, if I'm going to work accumulation or hypertrophy, if you want to call it, then these calisthenics movements aren't right for me because they're too intense. I can't get enough volume on it, so I'm going to do some basic weightlifting. And I never understood it like that until recently, even though I understood these principles from being a personal trainer, but putting it into practice for myself, and I'm getting far better results by understanding that. And so are our members at Unity Gym. They're getting really, really good results from understanding, okay, it's an intensification cycle. I'm going to choose this exercise because it fits that rep range, and now it's an accumulation cycle, so that exercise isn't right for me, even though that's my goal. I'm going to just work on one of these basic exercises that I can bang out 10 to 12 reps on.
Yeah, which is why, as I said on Wednesday, we decided to go with barbell free weights movements for this gym session, because with calisthenics it is so hard to progress and get that sort of adequate intensity at a level that's going to be enough to maintain strength. So with the barbells, and it's just so much easier to
and people might say, can you do calisthenics in one of these workouts? I'd argue that you wouldn't be watching this channel if you were ready to do that kind of thing, because the people that can do that, of course you can. If you can do 8 handstand push-ups in a set and you can do multiple sets of it, then do handstand push-ups for your circuit, but you're probably not going to be watching this channel if that's where you're at, because
you never know. We might have some
who knows?
Absolute guns out there. Cohen may be able to absolutely belt them. Okay, so next one, Holly K. Knight, favourite pull-up, supinated, shoulder width grip, because it's the only one I can do. The dead hang on chest to bar with perfect form for 2 whole reps. Well,
good work, man.
Tommy, you are turning into a superhuman because you are here, and don't worry, mate, it's going to come
infinitely
in a
more
big
than
way.
0 reps.
Let's take a snapshot of that comment and see where you're at in 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And good morning, brother. Welcome back to Sydney. See you on
and
Monday.
Cohen Parker's saying very true. I didn't know if you were here to watch me say all that, Cohen. That's awesome, man. I hope you got something out of that, and I hope that helps you with your one-arm pull-up journey.
Okay. By the way, guys, smash up the like button if you're getting value from this show. Smash it up. It's Black Friday. Come on. We should see 100 likes.
Okay. So what
even though we've only got a few viewers
So
live.
someone's saying on our How to Increase Overhead Mobility Step-by-Step guide, which, by the way, if you haven't watched it, is by far becoming our most popular video, and the comments that we're getting on it are insane. It's funny, when we do these videos, we never know what's going to hit. But the truth is, the stuff that we give out for free is better than what most people charge for. And that video, if you want to get better overhead mobility, that video is an absolute goldmine. So search for it, How to Increase Overhead Mobility, and then in brackets, step-by-step.
So relevant today in our talk about the different hand positions.
Absolutely. So Lee Solid is saying, great vid, I needed this. There was a couple more comments on that same video, but that's okay. So on our golfer's elbow, how to treat yourself with effective self-massage, Pepita Kunha is saying, hi, I'm currently in phase 6 of the golfer's elbow program of yours, the active mobility hang. Once I'm done with that, how many times per week should I do strength training, compound movements? Phil?
I'm just going to jump in and say it's really complicated and it's kind of case by case, and I'll be going into
you need to watch out. The whole reason why we haven't done the tendinopathy, the golfer's elbow week that Phil keeps promising, is that Phil wants to be really, really ready for it. And as much as he knows on it, he knows so much more about it than Yanni and I do. He still wants to do a little bit more research.
Doing lots of online courses and just talking to some experts in the field about getting the best sort of current research.
So when you see this week-long series on tendinopathy, drop everything and watch it, because you're going to get a gold mine.
And it is the most common thing that we deal with in the gym.
And the reason why I don't just jump into it and give a really, simple protocol is it's just so variable for different people. So we'll be talking through how to build your own program and go from there.
Yeah, most importantly, in regard to this comment, That is one of our oldest videos. It's about 4 years old, and although it has the most amount of likes or views out of any video because of its age, and it seemed to just blow up at the time, I'm not sure why. It's a vague video. It's like literally recorded from an iPhone. Watch the 2 most recent Golfer's Elbow videos, because I do believe that they deliver a bit better content and value.
Yep.
I think that's pretty much it, guys. That's all we got time for.
Do you want to talk about what we were thinking about doing while Yanni's away? Or?
Oh yeah, so I think we'll probably do it next week. But what Phil and I were talking about doing is doing a week on calisthenics for beginners. Phil, being an absolute beginner at calisthenics, he's never done it before. His suggestion was that I teach him how a beginner goes about getting started with calisthenics, and I think that's a really cool idea. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Let us know, would you like us to do a week-long show on how beginners should get started with calisthenics training?
So we could
if you are still watching, I'll pull a little thing that's going to come out right about now, and you can vote.
Yeah, let us know. Would you like a week-long?
Yeah, thinking of like the basic progressions with me. Maybe we could get Richie in to demonstrate some of the intermediate ones. Potentially Rad to, show us some of the advanced stuff as well. So
I want to see Phil do a press to handstand by the time I get back from my vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Remember, flash sale this weekend. It's for 72 hours. Everything 60% off. We've slashed the prices. What do you?
Look, guys. There's emails going out to our list, but if you're watching this video, all you need to do is go to unitygym.
I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the description.
I'll say it anyway. unitygym.thinkific.com. Just go to the courses, and if you want to get any of them, at the checkout you have to put in the promo code CYBER19, CYBER19. No spaces, all lowercase, and you'll get 60% off.
Yeah, and the sale ends on Cyber Monday, so make sure
you've got 4 days.
Yeah, let's go. All right, people. We'll see you next week. That's my last 2 days before I'm in Europe. I'll be blogging, but these guys will be ripping it up. Take it easy. Have a great weekend.
See ya.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.